A very wonderful evening, grade 8s. Basically, today I want us to focus on the climate regions. We have to look at what are the main contributory factors to the temperature differences or the climatological differences in these different places around the world. All right. I need you to know that there are 5 main elements that contribute to influencing the temperature of a region. The first one is latitude, the second one is distance from the sea, the third one is altitude, and the fourth one is ocean currents, and the fifth one is mountains or aspect. Now, these are the 5 main aspects that influence or contribute to influencing the temperature differences of different places. Maybe you ask yourself, why are some places hotter than other places, and then some other places are colder and quite freezing than most geographical places that you can compare them with any other location. Also, you look at the places, why are they probably receiving much more rainfall in comparison to other places? So it's one of these factors, one of these 5 factors that contribute to different geographical regions into experiencing different climates. You understand? We said the first one is latitude, and the second one is distance from the sea, the third one is altitude, and then the fourth one is ocean currents, and the fifth one is mountains. I need you to listen to me attentively and to pay attention. So how does latitude affect the difference or influence the climate of different spaces? Firstly, you have to understand that when we talk about latitude, we're talking about places that are closer to the equator. As you know that the equator is the main, is called the line of latitude, which is measured to be about 0 degrees Celsius, you understand? Okay, so how does the latitude, which is distance from the equator, influence the temperature differences? If you look at it this way, the places that are closer to the equator, they experience higher temperatures. What do I mean by that? The places that are closer to the equator, they get more direct sunlight, and in comparison to the places that are further away from the equator. You look at the poles, we have the North Pole and the South Pole, you understand? In the North Pole and the South Pole, those places, they experience cold temperatures or climates throughout the year. It's always snowing, there's snow throughout the year, it's cold. Why is it there are different temperature, there are temperature differences in these 2 geographical areas? It's because of the fact that in the latitude, in the equator, the sun is directed, it hits directly in places that are closely located to the latitude, you understand? In other words, the sun's rays or radiation travels a shorter distance to the places that are closer to the equator, and they travel a longer distance to the places that are further away from the equator. Hence, when the sun's radiation reaches those places that are further away from the equator, places like the North Pole and the South Pole, they end up being scattered, reflected, and then the intensity of the radiation is then dissolved. You understand that? In other words, it's not as intense or as fierce as when it was directed to the area from the start. So that is how latitude affects temperature differences in these spaces between places that are closely located to the equator and places that are further away from the equator. The second point we have to talk about is distance from the sea. How does distance from the sea affect the temperature differences? We look at this. Distance from the sea in this respect, we're basically talking about places that are far away from the sea, which have more extreme temperatures than places that are near the sea. What do we mean by that? Most of the coastal cities, coastal towns and areas, places that are closely located to the sea, they experience moderate temperatures, whereas places that are located geographically further away from the sea, they experience extreme temperatures. What do I mean by that? I'm going to make an example. When it's winter, for an example, if you look at Durban, in Durban, when it's winter that side, it's not as cold as in places that are located more inland. Why? It's because Durban is closely located geographically to the sea. You understand? But in places that are further inland, they experience extreme temperatures. If it's winter, it's going to be extremely cold. If it's summer, it's going to be extremely hot. Why? Places that are further away from the sea, they experience extreme temperatures. But places that are closely located to the sea, they experience moderate temperatures. Places that are located in the coast, an example, we said that if it's winter, places that are in the coast, it's not going to be that cold. It's going to be moderately cold, bearably. Places that are located in the coast when it's summer, it's not going to be extremely hot. It's going to be moderately warm. Why? It's because the wind that is blowing from the ocean, it's going to blow in those places that are located closely in the coastal areas, which is going to have a cooling effect on those towns and cities which are closely located to those places that are in the coastal areas. Then we also have latitude. One thing you have to know about altitude, it's the fact that the more you go higher, the higher you go, the colder it becomes. If you look at people who actually go for mountain hiking, the more they climb out the mountain, it's colder at the top of the mountain than it is at the foot of the mountain. What causes that is because the higher you go in the troposphere, we are in the troposphere, the colder it's going to get. You understand? That is why we experience those. That's why most places that are located in latitudes that are of high places, if you look at places that are mountainous, in the mountain you normally see that it's maybe there's a bit of ice in the morning in some places, especially in winter. You see a bit of ice, a bit of snow. Why? It's because the more you go up, the colder it's going to get. Places that are located in higher altitude, they experience really, really cold temperatures because the higher you go, the colder it gets. That's what you need to know when we're talking about altitude. Altitude. Then another point we need to talk about is ocean currents. Specifically, I'm going to focus on South Africa. When you look at South Africa, we have two main ocean currents that are affecting the climate of South Africa. We have the cold Benguela currents, and also we have the warm Mozambique currents. The warm Mozambique currents are more located in the eastern side of South Africa, and the cold Benguela currents are basically located in the western side of South Africa. You look at the ocean in Western Cape, in Cape Town specifically, it's much colder than the ocean in Durban. In Durban, it's a bit warmer. Why? It's because the ocean currents that side are mostly influenced by the warm Mozambique currents. It's a bit warmer that side. The ocean is a bit warm, especially even in winter, it's a bit warm. But this side, it's because we have the cold the cold Benguela currents, and then for Durban we have the warm Mozambique currents. That's the two differences in these ocean currents. Now that is why you find that in winter it rains mostly here in Cape Town. Why? It's because it's the cold Benguela currents ends up affecting the temperature differences in specifically here in Cape Town, whereas it's mostly rainy in Durban around about summertime. Even now, I think the previous weeks you heard about the flooding that was occurring mostly in Durban. It's because of the fact that it's largely influenced by the warm Mozambique currents. That's what is normally happening, especially in summer in Durban. Then the last point we need to focus on is mountains. How do mountains actually affect the temperature differences of these geographical areas? When we talk about mountains, we're talking about aspect. What you need to know about aspect is that in the southern hemisphere, the north-facing slopes are warmer than the south-facing slopes. It's because they receive more sunlight. So maybe a question might come around about this mountains or aspect on what are the advantages of having to build up your farm or to cultivate a field in fields that are, or mountains that are north facing, on a north facing slope. You're actually going to find out that there are more, you actually have more days than nights. Days are longer and nights are shorter when you are located in the southern hemisphere and you have cultivated your field in the north facing slope. So your plants are going to receive there'll be more photosynthesis. Actually, there'll be more plants growing and they'll be nourished because they're receiving proper sunlight. Whereas in the southern hemisphere, the south facing slope, they are going to be deterred in some point. In other words, they're not going to flourish, they're not going to grow, they're not going to be nourished because they are not receiving enough sunlight. Whereas when you go to the northern hemisphere, in the northern hemisphere, the south facing slope, they receive much more sunlight than the north facing slope. It's because they are more directed to the sun's rays. All right, I'm actually going to send a demonstration on the video so that you can be able to distinguish and to be able to internalize this lesson that we have actually started talking about. All right, class, cheers.
Thanks for joining us today on Earth Pen.